you guys, from a dynasty perspective, have put draft pick values on each. So, for example, tier 1 is 3 round 1 picks. It's the absolute premium blue chip players. Tier 2 is 2 round 1 picks. Tier 3 is a round 1 and a round 2. Tier 4 is 1 round 1. Tier 5 is 2 round 2s. And so it gives you this. This is something I've mentioned on the show that I don't feel like I have a great basis for dynasty trade valuations. There's a lot of trade calculators out there. Never been a huge fan of the calculators. I'm not trying to criticize them in any kind of way. I think they're a good, useful tool. I love this. This makes so much sense to me. It fills a huge hole for me in the sense that I like to think about players in terms of tiers. When I look at this tool and I look at your rankings on it, Shawn, it's so easy for me. Well, number one, you're the person that in the entire industry whose rankings I would trust the most. But if there's anybody that I want to disagree with or have a change of opinion on, it's really easy for me to see what it would mean to bump that player up a tier or down a tier in terms of value back to these rookie picks, which are a great currency in Dynasty to think through. You can apply your own sort of future value discount if you're looking at future picks of these, of these amounts. But ultimately, when you're analyzing trades, you can kind of just push everything back into this currency of round what picks, how many round 1s, how many round 2s, how many round 3s, and then understand sort of what the difference is and how the gap's going to need to be made up. This, to me, is exactly the way to think about dynasty trades. It's been, like I said, a hole in my own game. And so now you guys have these rankings up, Shawn. You've just updated yours. Quick teaser, this is for the FFPC Triflex League, Rotoviz Triflex Leagues that we are in one together. We talk about from time to time. Your tier 1 is all of the, because it's a super flex league, it's all of the premium quarterbacks. It's Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, and then just going across position by position, not necessarily in order. You have 1 running back, Jonathan Taylor, 2 receivers, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, 1 tight end, Kyle Pitts. It's also tight end premium. So that is your tier 1. Those are the absolute premium players in Dynasty right now that you would value at 3 round 1 picks or, give or take a little bit, right? But round 2 then, tier 2 then is going to be a little bit less than that. And you can see where all of these names fit. It is such an awesome tool. If anyone's not subscribed yet to Rotoviz, I feel like there's so many tools on Rotoviz that are worth the price of the subscription alone, as well as the analysis. But this tool alone, for me, fills such a hole that I'm very, very stoked about this.
Well, thank you for saying that. That's a great testimonial there, because that's sort of what we're trying to do, right? And last year, one of the things that Curtis wanted us to have was this trade value element with the rankings. So we put that in. People really liked it. And yet we have people asking for tiers as well. And that also makes sense for the reasons that you were saying. I think that this is sort of the next evolution in terms of thinking about it and having the tiers represent trade value. It was actually awesome for me because as I went through and I put the rankings together, there's this sort of tension or this interesting dynamic where when you're ranking players and you're thinking about, okay, well, do I have player A above player B? Do I like this position, a similar type of guy compared to this position, in Dynasty, in this format? And the Rotoviz Triflex format is a cool format because it is super flex. It is tight end premium. That's the direction the entire industry is going. I think it's the format that creates sort of the most balanced value, which is what we're looking for when we do startups and we do rookie drafts. It gives everybody a fair shot to play it. If you get a startup pick in the 6 to 12 range, you're not automatically, more or less playing years behind. And so we like that element of it. But then when you kind of put these rankings together, sometimes you're like, okay, well, I have this guy ahead of this one. And then you're thinking about it, well, who would I actually trade for more? Or what would I want for these players? And that element too, and one of the things that I asked Dave to do, and he did a great job of, is displaying it kind of by position. So the positions are all in the tiers together. You can kind of look across and see how guys from different positions compare to each other. That element of it, I think, makes it a great exercise in thinking through. And one of the things that you said is that you can disagree with me, and people are going to, right? And one of the things that some listeners will know is that my rankings, in some cases at least, tend to be a little bit more off of the consensus than maybe a lot of people's are. And one of the things that I do try and do with this is also consider trade value. And so if I'm thinking about what I would trade a player for, it's going to obviously based on production. I'm trying to get the guys who are going to have rising production and who are going to win leagues for you, but I'm not going to move someone so far down who, like, if you valued them at that level and then traded them, that you'd be getting crushed because the person actually has more trade value than that. So there is that element as well, but I'm also not trying to move guys so much just to reflect the consensus. So you're going to get some contrarian elements to it. But if you disagree with me, you can go in and kind of look at the tiers and think, okay, I would have this guy in this tier, which would mean this trade value, and I can use that to help negotiate trades. And the other thing I think is nice, and that we'll talk about in a moment, is that there's sort of an interactive nature between my rankings and the actual leagues that I'm playing. You and I are in a Triflex league together. I'm in a league with Blair. I'm in a league with Monty. I'm in many, many leagues outside of that. And so the trades and the trade offers are fast and furious, just, all day long, all year long. And so that element of, there's a lot of feedback that I get from making these offers and finding out, what people are willing to do. And one of the things too is the trade calculator is going to kind of tell you what you can get or what will work, but it doesn't necessarily tell you what trades you should make. Now, again, there are different kinds of trade calculators that have different strengths and weaknesses, kind of like you mentioned, but this should allow you to continue to move through players and gain a stronger and stronger team. And that kind of goes back to what we talk about with this perpetual championship window. So Ben, you mentioned that it's FFPC cut down week. You have to get to 16 players by the end of Thursday night. And I like this element too, right? And even though it's kind of working against us in a way right now, we have 18 guys that we want to keep. We haven't necessarily been able to execute any trades. We've talked about, should we sell at a discount? Should we cut the guys? One of the things that we have done is gain a lot of picks in this upcoming draft. And so again, just a little bit of a plug for the format. If people are looking for something really fun, this creates action in free agency. It creates value for these third, fourth, fifth, etc. picks in the rookie draft because the players who are cut go into that draft. And so one of the things that you and I have been talking about is, because we've accumulated a lot of picks, it might make more sense to us to strengthen the pool of players and potentially to draft some of our own guys back, as opposed to sell them to a squad where maybe that squad is 14 players deep. If we add a player or two, then they're going to be at their 16. They're not going to necessarily need to cut that player again, so that player will stick. We might have to pay more to get the player back later than simply cutting them and redrafting them. So I think that those elements also make this a fun format because it's very dynamic, right? The thing that people complain about in fantasy is if their league gets too static, you don't have that problem here.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said we've been talking about that. You mentioned that strategy to me, and I was like, wow, that's ingenious. I'd never thought of something like that. But that is, it really is. There's players on our roster that I don't want to cut. We've been talking about how we might try to package them and get a deal done. I love this element of where if we were to actually cut them as opposed to just sell them off for a future third, or maybe not even get a future third, who knows, future fourth or something that may not have much actual value. By cutting them, we are forcing them back into the player pool where they're either, like you said, either we could potentially redraft them if we really do want them back, or if they go higher than where we like them, it might push one of our rookie targets down to us. So it creates, like you said, it creates this element where rather than making sure everyone in the league has 16 people, some of them don't, and us giving them one to put into their keeper list for some future pick that's not really worth a whole lot, we're going to force them to actually have to draft that player or give us something that's worthwhile in a trade, which doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So we're going to cut a couple guys probably that we like, but it does have that ancillary benefit, which is really, really cool. I want to make one more comment on the tiers and the tool though, before we move on. And then also I have some comments on the cut down stuff, which is going to be a really fun discussion. But I'm just looking at your tiers now, and we'll probably get back to this. But I also just wanted to mention, like, how, as you were talking about it, how practical and how easy it is to use. Another thing that can happen, obviously, and this has happened to me before when I'm, I get a trade offer and I go look at some rankings, and it feels like those rankings are maybe a little bit, I don't want to say stale, but maybe they haven't been updated as frequently. And I know you guys do a great job trying to update as much as you can, but like the simple reality is no one who's doing rankings can get their rankings updated every day or even, weekly throughout the entire off season. But that's one of the other things about this tiered system that I think makes so much sense is that if there has been a change, I often find myself looking at rankings that are maybe a couple of weeks old, but I'm like, oh, this is before that news. And I kind of have a hard time sometimes deciding where I'd want to value that player. I love this tiered thing where I can say in those situations, it's not even necessarily where I'd be disagreeing with your rank, Shawn. It might be that I'm guessing that you would now have that guy ranked in a different position. So that's a really fun way to use these tiers now as well. And then I was also looking at your running backs. I want to give a little tease of some players, but your first tier only has Jonathan Taylor. Your second tier has Javonte Williams, who everyone knows we love, Christian McCaffrey, DeAndre Swift, and Breece Hall, a bunch of guys that everyone knows we love. The name that's not there is Najee Harris, who a guy that we have talked a lot about is maybe not from a profile perspective, maybe doesn't have the type of ceiling that we expect and is maybe being valued currently in his career too much based on what his current role is in his position within the Steelers offense. And so I love this thing where now you have him down in tier 3, right? Which isn't bad by any means. But this is a type of thing where you've put an actual value on some of the discussions we've had. To be clear, tier 3, and I'm not going to say your name every player, but tier 3 only has 4 running backs, and you only have 5 running backs total in the first 2 tiers. So you still have Harris in a tier that all the way through the bottom of that tier, every player is a top 10 running back. You still have him clearly valued in a certain way, but just that difference to having, for example, Javonte Williams in tier 2 and Najee Harris in tier 3 quantifies what we've talked about. I happen to completely agree with this. And there's still a lot of really high profile running back names down in tier 4. And so seeing how those guys sit in your actual valuation, and even the fact that there are fewer running backs overall through those first 3 tiers compared to, say, wide receivers, which you have a lot deeper lists in tier 2 and tier 3. It's just, man, this is just such a good tool. I just wanted to say that.
Did you enjoy that clip? Make sure you hit that subscribe button to get more content from Rotoviz. And of course, you can check out full-length podcasts at rotoviz.com/podcast. Available on all podcast platforms. Check out our wide range of content. Once again, rotoviz.com/podcast.